thinking back, I think the montage is terrific. What are some of the key things that pop out for you? From your sort of general thoughts, because I know you're involved in the webinar on the night.
Yes, and you've referenced that 1 hour and 45 minutes with the head coach of the Portugal national team. There's going to be quite a lot in there. So to get kind of 2 or 3 key points is a bit of a challenge, but I'll do my best. I think having put that montage together, some of them were in there. And I think if I go for my big 3, the first would probably be the importance of the fundamentals, what he called the fundamentals, and the importance of those at all ages. He talked about Ricardinho and Cardinal being able to do those and how important that was. So I'd say that was a big one. And linked to that, he used the word a lot on the night about body orientation. And for me, that's open body shape, being able to receive to face forwards. That would be something that was massive that came out of that. Second one would be the importance of pairs work. There was that point there he made that a large number of goals are scored from just 2-player combinations. So, and the other word he used a lot was, and the details. And so clearly he wanted to go into the detail of those 2-player combinations because he recognised that they were where the moves finished from to score the goals. So that would be another big one. And then finally, the fact that the coordinated movement between all 4 players was not pre-prescripted, if that's a word. I think that was a question some of us guys always watch these top nations and these top teams playing, and you think, is that all orchestrated? I think I asked it on the night, and he was quite categoric in the fact that whilst there might be an original setup to the system, and it looked like they played a lot of 4-0, from that point, it was over to the players. Can you recognise where the space is? Can you get your body in a position where you can scan and see those pictures of those combinations to create opportunities? So they would be my big 3: the fundamentals, the pairs work, and the fact that open play tended to be based on decision making.
Yeah. And Claire, thinking about your time at the girls' centres, so stuff like that about combination play and playing forwards, looking forwards, going forwards. Are they key things that would sort of lock into the your football philosophy?
Yeah, definitely. It resonated really well, and I think the key aspect that as we all imply in terms of development was actually how can we get them to make the right decisions at the right time, and that's what it kind of for me needed to be utilised. So even the little bits around. You mentioned orientation, so we're looking at body position and how to receive, when to receive, and what they were looking to do. Even on top of then the passing, and what was the purpose of the pass for the next. So it was, like I said, I had a list full of notes of details just from what he was handing out on that webinar. Like I said, it's 1 hour and 50, but I think it took me about 4 hours to go through it as I was trying to scribble down and stop and pause. So it took me a bit of a while to go through. But I think just, like we said, with the girls certainly from at Sunderland to the RTC, I fell in love with it. I fell in love with the game of futsal from looking at that little really refining of the details of coach and practicing and doing that. Yeah.
And I think that sort of body orientation, clearly people are going to be, I'm coming to you here really with how important it is about that facing forward and trying to be able to play forwards and the amount of pressure that it invites if you don't quite get that right.
Yeah, absolutely. And the worry, I don't know if it's bad to say, the worrying thing is going around in the day job and seeing all these players of all ages, both in futsal and football. It doesn't happen very often. It's very difficult, and even playing myself, I wasn't particularly good at it, but getting yourself in a position through your initial movement, it is tight. There's not much space. To get yourself that space to be able to do it is difficult. But when you do, it straight away puts the defender on the back foot. And that's why it's so important. And then if you then think about the first touch, so once you've got yourself with that body shape open, if you're thinking of the next action, your first touch can be a positive one to put the defender on the back foot. It can put you in a position where you can then play a variety. You can either take them on, you can play a diagonal pass, you can play down the line, but it opens up your options and it puts the defender on the back foot rather than a closed body shape. The defender is a trigger to press and they force you back to your own goal. When you can't use the goalkeeper sometimes because they've given it out, it puts you in a difficult spot.
Yeah. So I'm guessing as a player, I mean, you were playing up top, so I guess it's a little bit different. I know you still wanted to go forwards, but I guess one of your strengths in particular was about holding it up. But I guess it was still in your mind really about how you were receiving up there.
Yeah, I think because you got somebody kicking you from behind, you probably wouldn't be opening up. And because it wasn't my, you've got to play to your strengths. And my strength wasn't to beat a player 1v1 or to get half a yard to play a pass. It was to protect the ball. So I think I left it to the guys that used to play at the back and on the sides to use that skill to then find me, and then my movement would be taken off those. And I think that's something else George talked a lot about, recognising pressure on the ball. So if the likes of Cookie, Args, whoever it was that was playing, that was getting themselves faced up, once I could see they were in control of that situation, maybe the pressure on them wasn't quite so strong, I could then get myself in a position either on the back post because I knew they were going to go half a yard and smash, or come and post up to try and receive a set, into me and set back. So yeah, leave it to the guys that could do it, play to your strengths. But I think the point was recognising pressure on the ball. It was really important, and that was something else George talked a lot about on the webinar.
Yeah. And Claire, do you know when the girls were doing futsal in training and perhaps playing games, could you see that? Could you see the benefit of that coming through when they had a little bit more time and space in the when they went to play 9v9 and the 11 in the space was a bit more?
Definitely. I mean, I'm lucky enough, like I said, you said it was a lifetime at Sunderland, but I have 14 years there. I saw some developmental from the players and the benefits. So the age and stage, which will tip it a little bit more, but it actually, they could transpire into the football game. But fundamentally, because we had a futsal environment, they wanted to learn more about futsal as well. So actually, we've got some, as they recognised, they had, as Ian's just said there before, they couldn't go backwards, so they had to go forward. The concept of staying on the ball in those foundation phase elements was a must. And then the 1v1 demand of the challenge, can I beat the player? How do I then beat the player? And then the linking of the dualities of the pairings. And I'll be honest, it was a learning. How do you help coaches learn that when we're going through a development opportunity ourselves, and not only just as a player development, but as a coach development tool as well. So it was really helping coaches use their lens and their observations to try to pick and help them with the decisions. So sometimes we'd film it because it was that quick, and we didn't have, or we were learning to try and observe the game at that, tempo, that pace, the intensity, because we went and played boys. So we tried to quicken it up. At times, sometimes the girls will physically develop quicker as well. So we not only in terms of and some of the age bands, but in senior football as well, we try to play some of the like an 18, 19 scholarship with them to do that. Just to, again, help them to challenge around that decision making to make sure that they were doing it at the right time.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting that going and playing against boys that are bigger, faster, stronger, and it speeds it up even more for the girls, I guess. Dead interested about the coach development tour. I think there's that much repetition of the stuff happening over and over again. I think that gets forgotten sometimes, and it does. I don't know, coming from football myself, suddenly had to get an awful lot sharper around this sort of stuff. But we'll come back to this, I think, in a little while. You mentioned about the dualities, Claire, and probably, I think people will recognise that if they've been on courses with us, certainly on the UEFA B, it's something that we've really tried to hammer home, really, and get some understanding. And having been on the Advanced Youth Award last week, with Paul McGuinness, Graham Carrick are looking at that from a football perspective. And I think we'll see that coming through the Football Awards at the moment, loud and clear, about the combination play and how people connect with each other to deal with pressure, because there's pressure all over the pitch. And I think George talks about that, there's always pressure. Saying just some of the details that you went through on the combination play.
Yeah, I think we saw a few. We saw a 1-2 at the end, and I think the detail he was talking there was about the support player and how he was coming flat or shallow in order to draw his defender out. I think that was something he made a real point about. And then the player on the ball who is in a wide area, trying to stay on that ball long enough that he enticed his defender to come in, that he gave his mate time to drop into that space, so that when he played it, he changed the rhythm. So he talked a lot about change of rhythm throughout the night, which, trying to understand the translation, but timing and that kind of playing slow and playing quick. And I think sometimes that was on the ball. So this was an example where he was saying, stay on the ball, play slow, see it all set up, and then go quick. Play it with the outside of the foot possibly, and then go for the 1-2. Sometimes the change of rhythm came off the ball, so with the movement, and we might talk about that in a minute, that when players were moving, they were moving slow. I think sometimes here we talk to players about moving and they get charge around really fast and they can't control their bodies. Whereas if they move slow, it gives them a chance to be seeing what's going on as they're moving. It means their running gait is smaller so that when they just see what they need to take in, they can change direction quickly and then speed up to disguise and take that. The defender's less likely to know what's going on. But going back to the 1-2, I think the other reason for bringing the player shallow is that it leaves a lot more space so that when he does play, that player can't cover. It almost removes the cover from the bounce. So 1-2 parallels he talked about. So I think there was a goal possibly against France. I think we might have seen it on the montage possibly, where it's the speed of that movement. So he's going slow and then he speeds up and then he's facing forward. So as the ball comes, he's facing forward so that he can get a shot off. Yeah. Again, he's not come at a diagonal so that as he's got it, he's facing away from the pitch or away from the court. He's managing to face forwards. And then the quality, he talked about the weight of pass, the fact that it's lifted to give him time. There's loads there.
Loads, yeah. Yeah. Okay. I mean, we've got a clip in a second, I think. Just before we go to the clip, he talked a lot as well, didn't he, about how the opposition set up, so if it's, and we saw from the Champions League, a couple of weeks ago, how many teams were going man-to-man. Seemed nearly every team was going man-to-man. George talked a lot about, how he can shift the players around when it's man-to-man and there's a purpose about the movement to create those spaces. Where when teams were playing a little bit more zonal, it was more around just getting into pockets of space and trying to be clever with that movement and the timing of that movement.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was one of his points, that if you're man-to-man, continue running. He talked about continue your run. He talked about running. I thought it was interesting. He was talking about a lot running away from the ball or away from the way you pass it, with the reason being that if the defender's following you, it's harder for them to see you and the ball if you're running the other side of the ball. Whereas if you run across them, they can still see you and the ball. So I thought that was a really interesting point. And when we go back to this idea that it's not prescribed movements and it's players playing off principles, that right, if I can see they're following us man for man, I'm probably going to play and run off the opposite way because it makes it harder for the defender. I thought that was interesting. When you then throw in the rhythm and the change of rhythm, the slow to fast, I think that's where some of the chances and goals come from, that they run off the opposite shoulder, but they do it slowly. So if they need to dart back across, they can, or they can just come back and support the next pass.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so we have a look at the clip against France. I think that might be a good time to go to that. What I think we'll do, we'll play it through because George does speak over it at the start. So we'll hear what he's saying, and then we will run through it again. We'll have a rerun. So if everybody have a little peep, see what you're seeing, listen to George, and then we'll pick some bits out of it as well.
Trying to defend zone, one change, another change in where you have support, and now how you break the zone. Good. Not only between lines, but on the other side. But how do you call them? How do you try to organize? One first change and he's staying. 1 second change, should he continue running or should he stop? It's 3 against 2 and the construction zone, maybe we have some advantage. So call them a little bit more. Oh, how do we open everything? And of course, if a pass goes in the middle of the zone, between lines, of course, maybe you will have a lot of advantage. So do you understand the match? What's happening? Where do you have to stop? Where do you have to move? But then how do you orientate yourself? How do you establish connection with who's close to you, with who's far away from you? That's the main issue.
Okay. Do you want to just rerun that, Ian? Can you take control of it? And
yeah, I've got it.
Yeah.
And just talk through a few bits.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even just the player on the ball here, that idea that he's facing forward, and this is what he said, if you can face forward, you've now got a variety of options. I think that's one of the first points. He's got the one in the pocket. Potentially, it's hard to play really forward. but then you've always got the safe pass across the court where that player, and I think this is interesting, that player dropping deep. So he's not square, and I know you probably can't see my cursor, but he's not square at this stage. He's dropped off 2 or 3 meters so that if the pressure does come and the other guy does come high, he's in a good with real width, but he's given himself some depth, some time and space so that he can receive facing forward if he gets it. But as the clip develops, as he starts to see, I'm looking at the guy on the far side now, as he starts to see that this player's not got pressure on him, and George talked a lot about pressure on the ball, he can start to make a forward run on the far side. And it might be that this ball comes straight over to him. And I think George talked about the challenge with the lifted pass is it would take longer and it would be slower. So they may be able to recover. So that's maybe why he's chosen. Again, his decision, it's not a prescribed movement, but his decision to play down the line. And then the guy on the far side starts to time his run, knowing that it's going to come across into his path. So that was just looking at the guy on the other side for a little bit there.
Yeah, I mean, just wind it back for a second, just so we've got our man back on the ball again. I'm curious, when he plays this little lending pass now, he just draws the sort of defender that's the nearest one at the back, just draws him about 5 yards, so it opens up a line down the side there. And if the lending pass hadn't taken place, it draws about 3 players towards the ball. Yeah. And it's so subtle. But again, he's got to land on it forwards here. That touch to get it out his feet and round is phenomenal, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And even if you go back to this individual player in the middle now, he's just gone off the far shoulder. And George talked a lot about if it's against the zone, the principle is you come back and you get in the gaps. So if this was a man-to-man, as he runs off his back shoulder, he probably carries on based on George's principles. Yeah. But he comes in. If you just see him scan, I'm trying to stop it. When I see him a couple of times, he checks 2 or 3 times to see maybe he might be able to play around the corner. But no, he's not. He's just going to set it up. And again, it affects not only the guy at the back, but the top right defender as well. It sucks him in a bit. So if you did want to pass across the court, you could, but it sucks him in as well. So yeah, that lending pass, really important. The weight of the pass, it allows him to play it first time. But look, he keeps checking shoulders. Yeah. Okay. And the touch from Ricardinho isn't bad, is it either? So I guess that's why if you've got absolute quality, you can, doesn't matter which way you're facing, you can get yourself playing out. But he clearly knows his next action ahead of time. He's clearly, although he's in that position, scanning to know the space is on the other side by the way they've moved. And so he's just got to find that player. Yeah.
Okay. Pete, can I come to you? Because I know there's 1 or 2 questions that's popping up. Is there any themes in the questions that we can have a little chat about?
Yes, we've had some great comments from Neil, Tim and Ruben about how important it is to develop the individual as almost the starting point for everything that follows. And I think there's general agreement that futsal will begin to challenge the development of that type of player that you know that you can rely on in tight and pressurized situations.
Yeah, I think it's critical, isn't it? If one player, if you've got a weak link within the chain, everybody needs to. Everything breaks down at that one link on that weak link, and it's making sure that the players have got that. Making sure that they have got that technical ability does allow you then to makes your tactics come alive. If they haven't got that technical ability, everything else will break down.
Yeah. Adam also Adam Lowe asked it was more for clarification from, I think Ian used the phrase coming shallow for the ball.
Yeah.
He just wanted some explanation about what does that term mean.
That's fine. And
if you could help with that, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. And it may not be the best language. It's hard to show without a board or without the video, but ultimately coming deeper or flatter. So if you can picture a player wide and then a central player, that the central player comes back and comes in line with the wide player to bring their player out. So it leaves a gap behind. Bates, feel free to try and help me out here as I try and explain this, but they come back and in line with the wide player. Maybe that's what I'm looking at. Usually or typically in football, you might see a 1-2 played at almost a 45-degree angle, like that sort of angle. but the player comes back towards in line with the winger so that it becomes a square pass and then in behind. I hope that's somehow got to the point.
Yeah, I think the football people, you'll see Foden doing that all the time. I think that's one of his trademark moves. That he's, they have to come flat to draw the defender.
Drop back.
If they don't come flat, then it's easy. It's too easy to cut off the wall pass.
And the defender can cover it as well.
Absolutely. And I think the other critical point is about them receiving on, probably landing on it where it's the best foot's going to be able to play that first time pass. I think that's another key area that sort of doesn't get recognised. If we're talking about pinpoint delivery, that's really handy for the player landing on the ball.
I think in football, there's this notion that two players should never be on the same line. But I think there are some situations where actually being on the same line can disrupt the defence in a much better way. And so we shouldn't exclude it at all.
Yeah. Claire, just back to that first point from sort of Neil and Tim and Ruben about the individual development. What is that where you went with the work with the girls' centre? Was it around focus on more individual stuff, or was it the team aspects where was your main point of focus and the reason for using it? I'm
going to opt in and say both, because I'll be a bit selfish, because it was for the individual to develop their technical learning, and the environment naturally give them visions of, so the reduced tempo, so they had to play quicker because of the tempo, decision making. There must opportunities that they had to get past players. So we actually then, as coaches, put some kind of constraints on at times to help them understand the game a little bit more and be a bit more, I would say, forceful with it, because we had to get them to understand the game and learn about the game first of all. So the whole bit where they couldn't go back to the goalkeeper, sometimes at the really young age groups, we had to let them just to opt out. And then it was always a contentious thing, like, do we start doing that or do we not, or just throw them in? And that's the one, where do we start fully, or do we actually help them to get learning about it? But eventually we just took it off, and then it really just put the environment then forced them. But going back to what you said about the individual, unless they've got the skill sets to be able to get out of the situation, then we had to help them to make those, to then when the decisions came, they understood why they were doing it. Then they knew what they could pick from. It was more or less building a menu of what they could do and what options. So we go back about that little, the duality stuff for the 2v2. So how do you get past them and what can you do? So it wasn't just about then me, but what was my teammate helping? So going back again to that horizontal line, or is it vertical? Is it diagonal? Is it what type of pass? But if they haven't got those skill sets yet, they might not be able to answer the question. Yeah. So it was about building up their profile to when they get to the youth phase, when they were 12 to under 14s, the girls were playing under 14s against the boys, like we said before, in those mixed tournaments, playing in all the different formations and positions. So whether it was, if Park's up top, what's the difference playing at the top of the diamond sometimes if they were playing, or if they were playing up front, compared to if they were playing at the back and they're looking to play out, so what is it when they're facing players? What were the different problems that they had to solve as well? Which again, we kept seeing from the thematics of staying on the ball, duels, trying to get past. But again, just that concept of player learning and honestly, coach learning. Like, we were on a process ourselves, so it was 6-7 years in, but seeing the players now, it's been a real benefit. Yeah. And I can probably honestly say that they'll go into futsal. Being honest, they'll come away from a football pathway, but they have to go and play it. They got to continue and keep playing it to learn and love about the game. So that's what we're looking to do.
Yeah. No, I think that's the point, isn't it? When you've seen players coming through and you can see what they're getting from the different formats, it really helps them.